going to be talking about the short story Cranes or A Crane by Hwang Sun-won.
문학적 서정성을 극대화한 한국의 소설가 하면 누가 떠오르세요? 저는 소나기를 쓴 황순원 작가가 가장 먼저 떠오릅니다. 한국인들에게는 워낙 친숙한 이름이지만 번역 문제 때문에 해외에서 뛰어난 한국 작가들이 많이 알려지지 않은 것이 사실인데요. 놀랍게도 황순원의 작품을 공부하는 캐나다 고등학생들이 있습니다. 바로 문학교사 알렌 더프리슨의 수업을 듣는 학생들인데요. 한국 문학사의 한 획을 그은 황순원, 고운 등의 작품을 공부하는 외국인들이라니 신기하게 느껴지지 않으세요? 일제강점기로부터 근대화 시기까지 작품에서 한국사를 폭넓게 다루며 수많은 한국인의 심금을 울린 황순원의 작품을 캐나다 학생들이 어떤 식으로 배우고 있는지 오늘은 수업 영상을 번역해 가져왔습니다. 황순원의 단편 소설 학에 대한 이야기를 영상으로 만나보시죠.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Korean Literature Weekly. I'm your host, Mr. Alan Friesen.
Big time!
Today we're going to be talking about the short story Cranes or A Crane by Hwang Sun-won. We're going to be looking at some of the important features of it. I'm not going to be going over the entire story in detail, but pulling out various threads that we can examine. Let's talk about, first of all, the central figure or the central metaphor in this story, which is the crane. In Korean culture, the crane represents immortality and long life. It was believed that the nobles in Korea, back in the Joseon dynasty, if you died, you came back as a crane. They're very noble, very beautiful creatures. It's rumored that they lived 1,600 years. So, we've got these cranes that are present not just in the title, but also throughout the middle and at the very end of the story. And we've got two main characters here, Sang-sam and Tok-che. Sang-sam and Tok-che. So the story begins with the sentence, "This village to the north of the 38th parallel demarcation line was lying utterly still beneath the lofty, clear autumn sky." The language here is a clear indication of the story's setting. The fact that we're talking about north of the 38th parallel indicates that this takes place not only in Korea, but it takes place in Korea after 1945, after the country was split into two. And in fact, we are talking about North Korea here. So, the first thing that we see is this very idyllic pasture. We see a very beautiful image of this town, about how this neighborhood suffered little damage. You've got dirt floors, you've got paved gourds, you've got this very rural setting, something that we are very familiar with here in Lundbreck, Alberta. He comes into the city, or he comes into the village, and he sees that there's a youth who is tied up with a rope. This, as we discover, is going to be Tok-che. He was the first youth he had seen in the village. He went closer and examined his face. He was startled. Why? It was Tok-che, his best friend as a child. He asked the member of the security team who had accompanied him from Chontae about him. So we know that Song-sam has come up from Chontae, which is in the south, with a member of a security team. But we have a southern Korean person coming into the village, which is in North Korea. This is strange. This is strange. How does this South Korean person know this person from North Korea? How does Song-sam know Tok-che? And as we find out later, they both grew up in the same village. They're both from the same place, and that is where they are now. He's remembering, Song-sam remembers an incident in their youth where Tok-che was nice to them. They were stealing chestnuts from the old man with the boils tree. So, Song-sam wasn't able to steal any chestnuts, and he was very sad about it, but Tong-ne did, and he shared with him. So, again, we, from a Western point of view, if we know all the facts behind the story, we should be scratching our heads right about now. You've got this guy, Mr. Friesen, you're telling me, from South Korea, who's going up into North Korea, who knows a guy from North Korea, and the guy from South Korea is remembering the North Korean guy with kindness. He was a nice guy. Up to this point, everything in the story fits our Western point of view. We have a South Korean guy going into North Korea and capturing one of those evil North Koreans. Yay, America! This makes sense. But then he remembers him with kindness. And later on in the story, we're going to find that the entire morality that we have imposed upon the text becomes inverted. So Song Sam remembers the kindness and he gets upset. He feels this tension between his duty as a South Korean officer and between his memories of this person who was his friend. He says, filled with a sudden surge of unexpected rage, Song Sam shouted, "Hey fellow, how many people did you kill during the war?" He doesn't reply. He doesn't say anything. He's asked again and again. He doesn't say anything. And then he asks, why would someone who had been vice chairman of the Peasants' League stay put and not run away? Were you hiding for some kind of mission? So what Song Sam is saying here is, he's saying, you were a political entity in this village. You were important in this village. You knew we were coming. Why didn't you try to escape? And the suspicious mind is immediately thinking, and Song Sam echoes this, are you planning some sort of mission? Were you planning on trying to hide so that you could somehow come into South Korea and wreck our great country? And he doesn't make excuses. I was made vice chairman of the Peasants' League because I was the son of the poorest peasant and reckoned a hard worker. If that's a crime deserving death, well then, okay. Now as before, I'm a guy who's good at nothing but farming. Now father's lying sick at home. It's already been half a year. And then we've got Song Sam saying, didn't you get married? We talked in an earlier lecture about the questions that people ask each other. The reason that Top Chain didn't escape was because he was being a good son. This fits right into our notion of an ideal Confucius gentleman. And at the very end of the story, Song Sam, the Southerner, says, let's go crane hunting. He's referring to the time when they were both children and they had secretly captured a crane. And then they had let it go shortly before it had been shot. So he's saying, let's go crane hunting. Why don't you, hurry up and send some cranes over. Why don't you go run over there and see if you can get some cranes to fly out from the ground. He's not telling him to go hunt cranes. He's saying, okay, you know what? This is your chance. Why don't you go run? Why don't you escape? So at the very end of the story, we have this person who is a rebel, who betrays his father, betrays his bride. He decides that he can no longer do this to his best friend, and he lets his best friend escape. At that point, just then, a few red-crowned cranes were slowly flying with outstretched wings across the high blue autumn sky. And as we talked about earlier, the cranes represent long life. They represent immortality. And it's my belief that what they're talking about is not the immortality of any of these characters. They're not even really talking about the immortality of North Korea or South Korea. They're talking about the immortality of the Korean spirit. That despite what might happen between the North Koreans and the South Koreans, the Korean spirit must live on. And that's it.